You can actually like change your AirPods settings. Maybe this is already the beginning of the pod because this is like a public service announcement. For those who accidentally hang up their phone calls by putting in or out their AirPods, that happens like on a weekly basis to Metic and I. You can make that into like a double tap instead of a one tap. Hanging up the phone.
What? Double tap to hang up. Oh yeah.
Exactly. So it doesn't happen accidentally.
Yeah, it happens.
Every week.
But hey, you live and you learn, and we get better because of it.
We learn and we adjust, adapt, whatever.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to the 15th episode of Beyond Beats.
15.
Almost forgot the name there for a second. My name is DYVN and we've got Metic.
Yeah.
How you doing, man?
Good. Today is release day, actually. So
it's
I don't know if I don't even know if we planned it. Actually, it was not planned, but it just so happened to be release day of one of my new singles out on your label,
Misa Records. Whoa! So, yeah, did we just say that simultaneously?
Jinx. But yeah, that was pleasant. A pleasant coincidence. Let's just say that. And what do we?
Is it my job today as like the label A&R to plug your song a little bit, or is that your job as the artist, or?
You know what? At this point, it all melts together. At this point, I think I don't think
we've become
people
one whole.
Will, yeah, I think I'll be bombarding it on my feed enough that it doesn't hurt to plug one more time. So
can't wait to see that.
Yeah.
So that's like a super chill acoustic guitar, actually, lo-fi tune. I don't even know if it's like it's definitely not traditional lo-fi, but
not really.
As I was posting today on Instagram, I love how you like take the genre further with that song. It just feels like one of those going beyond lo-fi hip hop, but still having one foot in the pool, sort of.
To be honest, I don't even know. Like, that started out, I actually came up with that progression in the during my road trip from London to Mongolia, and I was in the middle of a truck stop in Kazakhstan one night, and I couldn't sleep, and I had a travel guitar with me, and I couldn't sleep, so I went out and I just sat under like it was a pretty starry night, and then I just sat there and started noodling around the guitar, and then pieced together this progression, and then went back to sleep.
Damn! And then went back like phone. Years after to release that.
That was like 2013 when I did that road trip. So yeah, I am
Holy
reaching.
Smoke.
I just never released it, but I've made it, and
wow.
There's a time and place for everything, and I think it's about time. It's about time, actually. Yeah, coming up on 10 years.
Damn! I didn't even know, like, when you sent me that tune, what a gem that was, and how much history that has.
Yeah, it's one of my, I don't know, I just felt inspired from not being able to sleep, and then making it productive in some sense, and it turned out to be one of my favorite progressions on the guitar. And then I think it's really not like a traditional lo-fi beat, because it's very much a guitar song.
Yeah.
And then it just so happened to have a beat over
element to it. Yeah.
It's so bare that it doesn't even have a bass. It doesn't have a bass, electric bass. It doesn't have 808. All the bass notes are coming from when I'm playing the guitar, I do like a walking bass line thing with my thumb.
Okay.
So there's no bass. All the bass is just me like EQing the low end of the acoustic guitar to make it more
right. And you know what? It works so well that I didn't even notice. and I put the song out there. So.
Yeah, but I don't know, man. Like it's just one of those things that doesn't. Yeah, who puts out a beat without bass in it? You know,
That
like,
actually
it's definitely
that
not
happened
traditional.
again. Once again, same guy, me. That happened to me. First of all, that happened to me once. Actually, me as an artist, that I put out a song. It's an Over the Moon song. I forgot the name, but it's my sleepy project. Together with my wife,
Right.
and we just forgot recording bass, and it was like we had like one day to make the song for like a compilation. We just sent it off. It was super cool. It's still super nice, but it just doesn't have bass, and I just forgot, dude. That's like so dumb. But also we have one tune on Musa Records by Pope that also doesn't have any bass in there. I forgot which song it was, but it works. It's nice. So.
Sometimes as an engineer, as a mix engineer, as a recording engineer, like you're always thinking about how best to fill out all parts of the spectrum. You know, you gotta make, especially with like low end, you gotta like, make sure you carve out EQs from, you know, with the kick and the bass, make sure they sit in separate ends of. But you know, like sometimes you don't even need a bass. Yeah.
But you know what? That's like a perfect transition to my last night, because I also had a sleepless night last night. I slept like 4 hours, and
you don't look like it. You look refreshed.
Thank you. and it's friggin' 5 p.m. over here, but that's just the iPhone camera, I guess.
Right.
Or the Sony camera. So I woke up at 3 a.m. and my head was just like almost exploding in a good way, full of ideas. Not a headache, just like I was like, oh my goodness, I know everything. Do you know that when you wake up and you just feel like you've got the answers to everything, and then you want to write them down and then you forget?
And then you're trying to like take out the record a voice memo and all that.
Yeah. I always put out take out the notes app, which I did, and I actually, because like I said, perfect transition. We wanted to talk about the process of making an album, which happens to be what my entire week has been about. I'm finally like deep in the zone of making my first album. I've been planning to make it for like the last years, but like actually like with dates and everything for the last 3-4 months, I think. But I didn't really like. Well, let's not, get ahead of ourselves. But last night I woke up and I was still like missing a title, a concept for the first song, but I'm featuring a lot of vocal tracks on the album.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's pretty much half and half instrumental and vocal music with like different artists that I've had the pleasure of working with in the last couple of years as a producer. So I just figured I want to have like a album rather than like a beat tape. And that was always my vision for my first album, but I wanted to like get there first, like find enough artists that I build up like a good relationship with, that I feel like I can trust and work with. So yeah, and I feel like I'm finally there. And so that's basically the idea of the album. And the third song still felt kind of like I already made the beat, but and I know the title, but it felt like the title felt kind of flat if like there's no depth to the verse, like the story behind the song, right? I don't write the lyrics myself, but I do have like ideas of what the lyrics should be about, what they should lean into. And since I know the people I work with pretty well, at least, over the internet, I kind of know how they, what they're like, because we're like friends, And yeah, so, but I didn't know where to go with that third song, and I just woke up and I knew exactly what it's going to be about. And that was kind of the key for me to complete the entire album, like everything that I was still missing in the concept of the album. Because I feel like I'm just jumping from A to B to C to X, but yeah, I was sort of like concepting the album first, and actually my wife Julia was concepting the album, but she left a couple of blank spots for me to fill out. And yeah, tonight I just woke up and everything just made sense.
So did you end up figuring out the title, or is that still because you figured out the concept, but that track 3, did you figure out the title as well now, or?
Oh, the title for the third track already existed, but the album title didn't exist yet, and the title of the first song didn't exist either. So
I see.
that was like the blanks that were still missing. But now like everything just really fell into place, and I just know exactly what the album is supposed to feel like as a whole, and that just feels so good. And I feel like now I just need to sit down, which I was, in part already doing this week, and make the beats, like I said, I already made like a bunch of beats and a bunch of backing tracks for the vocalists. So because you have a lot of good nuggets in there that I want to like expand on, but like before we get into that, I wanted to ask, like, for those tracks that you do have vocalists on, are you going to release instrumental versions of that, or is that something you're just going to let it be in a vocal track period? Just a vocal track period, because I feel like I'm intentionally leaving space for like the singers and rappers that I have in mind, and
right.
Not just like the frequency spectrum to get back to that, but also just generally like I don't add too many elements so that they can fill it out with vocal harmonies and whatnot. So
yep. Yeah, that's cool. That's a good way to do it. I've also seen people do just lyrical version and then an instrumental version that's like filled out with instruments,
right?
Instrumental layers versus vocal layers and all that. So
right.
there's just so many different ways to do it, and it's cool to see how you do it as well.
I've done that before, or I've done that the other way around, that I released an instrumental and then a rapper just sent me like a full song over the song. I was like, yeah, that's dope. We're gonna release that.
And then re-release, like exactly. A vocal version.
Blossoms or Nicely
Blossoms.
And to me now Blossoms sounds like an instrumental. It's funny because when T. Peters is the name of the rapper, when he sent me that song, I was like, oh, this is too crowded. Maybe it wasn't, probably wasn't properly mixed either, but it just sounded like a complete track that was overcrowded with vocals. And now when I listen back to Blossoms, I'm just like, where are the vocals, man?
Yeah, just something's
like
missing.
An empty instrumental track to me now.
How can people listen to that without vocals?
Yeah.
Albums versus singles. Because before you get into the mindset of an album, there must be something that sets it apart from just a single. Yep. And I feel like this discussion, I've thought about this. Almost think about this on a daily basis. Like, oh, should I just do an album, do a single, blah blah blah. And there's so many arguments in this day and age for artists to put out just singles instead of albums.
Like I've done for the last 4.5 years. So.
Right. Just all the analytics. All the staying relevant, consistent releases, all that stuff, reminding people that you're still here type of thing. So like I feel like the narrative nowadays is so overwhelmingly singles driven for so many different reasons.
Right.
But I'm with you, like, because I feel like there's, in some poetic sense, there's always that little thing that tells you, man, maybe I should make an album this time. And I feel like that's where you are. And I feel like that's what kept you up that night, essentially. Like that overriding concept that kept you up and that got you so excited to flesh out this concept. And I feel like whenever you get that spark and that motivation, it's almost like a calling.
Right, and that's exactly what it felt like. It was like I woke up and everything was just so clear to me. Like everything was just, I saw it and I just had to like figure out my thoughts. And like luckily I wasn't like still half asleep, so it was one of those things where I actually was able to manage getting my thoughts out properly. And then right. I just stayed awake because I couldn't. I was so excited, and I just watched surfing, like a surfing competition.
That's pretty funny, but I feel like that for me at least, and I feel like that's what you experienced with your upcoming album. But I feel like for me to make an album, the concept almost needs to be strong enough to outweigh the the kind of shortcomings of making an album,
or the
right?
advantages of not making an album.
Right, because making an album in 2023 especially is hard work.
Right.
At least for I can only speak for myself. Like, it's hard work in the sense that you're building up like a big track list, and you can't you want to be submitting these to different places, but you can't. You're holding this for an album. When it comes to mixing, you can't. There has to be like, it needs to sound coherent,
Right.
mixing and mastering, and then it can't. It needs to flow. Figuring out the order,
Right.
track list, art, aesthetic, and all that. So it becomes much grander of an undertaking than it is just a single. So,
but also, I gotta say, in a way, it's kind of easier because I figured out the concept before even making any beats, so I knew what kind of songs I had to make. So basically, I didn't have to struggle and sit down and play with chords and see, because I already had an exact idea what every song should feel like. And I want to shout out my wife, Julia, big time for that, because like I said before, actually she did the entire concept, because I was I was struggling with getting, because I think my thoughts or my emotions are so so abstract sometimes, and so music, how do I put this, I can sort of as I think a lot of musicians can relate to, feel better or let my emotions out better as music than as concrete thoughts, if that makes sense.
I know what you mean.
It's not that I can't talk about it or something. That's not the issue. Just sometimes things are too abstract in my head. So Julia knows me super well, obviously, since we've been together for almost 10 years now. And I basically, after I've been trying to make this record work, I made 3-4 really good beats, and I was like, no, this isn't it. This can't be the album. This can't be, after so many years, this can't be the record that to me, I kind of owe it to myself to make something that I feel is the album that I want to be my first album,
Mm-hmm.
So I asked her to make a concept of, because she's also, for those who don't know, she's also a really talented songwriter. And
shout out Jen.
Yeah, exactly. And she's, but also really creative when it comes to concepts of all kinds. Which is kind of a very funny skill to have, but she's really good at concepting stuff. So I was like, can you make me an album that feels like it represents me? Because I feel like you can do that better than I can do that myself. So she was like, she talked a little bit about what kind of artists I feel like are similar to me in terms of the vibe, not even the musical style, but just the vibe that they exude as people, even more so.
Right.
And then from there on, she did an analysis and all that kind of stuff that she does, and then just basically came up with a track list and a list of titles, except for the first title and the album title, like I said. And she was like, "Here you go. How do you like these titles?" And I feel like this song should be more leaning towards that direction. This is going to be an instrumental. And the one thing that I did was I analyzed 2 albums sort of as to how they flow.
Right.
It's a very weird approach, I feel like. But I was sort of listening to 2 records. It Is What It Is by Thundercat, and the record by Domi and JD Beck.
Oh, right.
And I was kind of listening to, because I like those a lot in terms of the way they're built up, the way they start, continue, and end, basically. And I kind of made notes as to how they flow, the songs flow, how they change, how they pick up the pace. And then in terms of Domi and JD Beck, where they have vocal tracks, where they have instrumentals. And I kind of made a template, sent that to Julia, and she made a song order including vocal track, instrumental, and so on.
Wow.
So now I basically just have a template, because that's where I strive most. When I know what to make, I can make, like I did. I had days this week where I made like 2 beats in a day, pretty much from start to finish. Because when I just know what to do, I'll just do it, you know.
Right.
And so the grueling part is done, you know, like all the things you described. So
right.
let's hope it's gonna be good.
It's awesome just hearing about how collaborative this process is, and I feel like sometimes it does take a close one, a loved one, in your case Julia, to really kind of distill the essence of you better than you can sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was really cool how, you know, she approached it, and she did it in such a detailed way, you know, in terms of like track lists and vocal, instrumental, blah blah blah, all that. Like it's pretty comprehensive. And and I
was like, are you sure? Like, and sometimes I was like I was like doubtful of some titles, and which later on turned out to be my favorite titles, you know, because she was like, yeah, this is 100% you, like this is so you. And I'm like, oh really? Oh yeah, now that I think about it, you know. And then I was like, oh, this is actually growing on me. I love that title now. So can't wait to make music, sort of.
Wifey knows best.
Right. So only the first song, and I think one of the last ones, which ironically is the one that she's gonna sing on, are titles that I came up with. So in case you guys listening to and watching the podcast will tune into the record at some point.
Yeah, we'll be rewinding to this when the album drops, and then we're gonna be filling in the gaps, I'm sure.
But I'm also like making a little YouTube series documenting my process. I asked people on Instagram if I should do that, and people were like super, like a lot of people answered like more than I expected, at least, whatever a lot means nowadays. But to me it was a lot, and like, yeah, just super cool to see people being interested in that. And for me it was also kind of like, I want to make that, but you know, if no one's gonna be interested, so for me that was just like the kind of push that I needed to know that 30 people will be watching or so, you know.
Yeah.
So I just basically filmed a lot of parts of the process now, which I hope my SD card won't be full making this podcast.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you already you were filming like behind the scenes footage as well.
Exactly.
During the days that you were making. Oh, that's really smart.
Yeah.
That's a good way to do it. Are you like screen recording your DAW sessions as well, or
sometimes, but not that often? Usually it's more like filming
just the camera,
and
B-roll.
Then like capturing the audio. Actually, I've got this app that captures audio from any app, so I can basically just sync my audio output from Machina to the camera audio.
Oh, I see. What are you using to do that? Just curious.
The app is called Piezo. Sounds kind of Italian, so it's Piezo.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's cool. Cool approach.
Yeah,
and I think that will make the behind the scenes content a lot more engaging. I feel like with B-roll and like the actual, because I feel like if you, especially capturing those like eureka moments, you know, like when you finally solved the riff, you know.
Yeah. Though these things I often do off camera, because I get super I sometimes get tense when the camera is on. I think for one, because I don't want to fill up my storage too much. I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
I'll
the
just
storage.
do it off camera. So these oftentimes aren't filmed. Yeah.
I do like what you mentioned earlier about likening the album making process to a puzzle, and because that it really is a puzzle process. You know, you've got this whole thing in front of you, and then you know, the big picture might not be clear at the beginning, but you know, as you fill out more and more pieces, you know, it gets clearer.
And
and
it was still very much puzzle-esque, like even the way we approached it, even though we, I think, like kind of bypassed a lot of those making one track after another and not really knowing how to put them together later on. But like coming up with that concept and that approach, you know, that was the puzzle itself already, kind of.
Right.
But I was just thinking, like, how do you usually do it? Like, how do you? Because you've got like 3 albums out or something, 3, 4.
Yeah,
right?
two collab albums, 2 solo albums, and sometimes the collab albums are almost easier.
Yeah.
Just because, so for example, with my collab album with, I did a collab album with this ambient producer in Hong Kong called Norvik, and we did a record called A Fleeting Dream and Waking Life. Our whole driving force behind that album was to kind of combine our respective genres, because he's very much ambient piano, synth type of guy, and his sound is very ethereal. And I make lo-fi stuff, but I also make like upbeat boom bap stuff. But when collaborating with him, I was really trying to explore like the kind of merging the 2 genres between ambient and like beat making, and so that was the concept, and drove the entire album. But like when it comes to like my solo albums, like sometimes I wonder, like, what am I trying to say, right? Like, so with my first album, it was called Neon City Memoirs. It was just like there wasn't much of concept other than I have all these tracks that have been unreleased since the early 2010s, and I wanted to get it out. So and those were all the tracks that I made like when I first started like beat making in Hong Kong. So I just called it Neon City Memoirs, but there wasn't like a grand overarching theme. And then with Soul Feather, which is like a album that I released not long after I moved to New York, that was kind of me telling the story of what it's like leaving home, Hong Kong, and arriving in a new city and trying to navigate the uncertainties and the excitement of moving to a new city. So that was very clear.
That's when I got to know you, actually. That's when I stumbled over your music the first time, and I thought that was so cool. And I remember you did those like little talking videos where you just like explained.
Oh my God, you saw those? Those did not do well. So I'm actually
I can imagine,
like really
like,
grateful
that the attention span. It's kind of like single versus
those
album.
Did not do
long talking videos versus.
I tried.
3 second.
I tried really hard for that.
No, but I saw those and I really enjoyed them. I thought that was super cool that you gave that insight beyond the beat. See what I did there?
Yeah.
They probably like planted the first seed in my head, like to do the podcast with you years later. But
right.
I don't know. But
I'm glad that.
I thought that was really cool. And I remember like you put it out through Stereo Fox.
Yep, that was Stereo Fox. Yeah, that was a really good exercise. But like after that, I've been kind of there. I haven't been there. I haven't come across the new fresh concept yet. That's really compelling me to put out an album. I have a list of songs that I've made in a certain period of time, like 2022 to an end of 2021 and then most of 2022. I have like 7 or 8 songs that I made in that period that sounds pretty consistent with each other.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the sounds that I was exploring at that time, the different effects that I was exploring at that time, different chords, but I'm still not finding like a really strong overarching concept. It's not like I can move to another place and be like, hey, this is what it's like to there's nothing as strong as that. So like I haven't.
True.
That's why I haven't really been too motivated. I'm still making songs, right? I'm still making songs, but I finish a song and I just put it in the pile and I'm like, still waiting for that big kind of theme. But you know,
I
if
totally
something
get that
comes along,
though. For me, it was when I moved here. Also, like, and leaving home, not halfway across the globe like you did, but a couple of 100 kilometers.
Right.
I think I have no idea, dude. I don't know how far this is from Berlin or from my hometown. Anyways, there's an ocean, like a small portion of an ocean between me and where I come from, so that counts.
Yeah.
No, so when I moved here, I also felt like I came up with titles and the concept and everything for an album because I thought this is it. This is gonna be the time. But then, to me, it kind of felt like sort of too random that I didn't make an album when I was still living in Berlin, which felt like home for so long, and I never, and then just making my first album to be about this big change kind of felt wrong to me because I felt, like my first album, because it just felt like, why would I make something that's about me not being who I used to be anymore and not knowing where life is going from here on? So it was kind of too much change to sort of call this the first DYVN album. And it's probably like no one thinks about that, but for me it was.
No, I know exactly what you mean.
And then I also was working a day job, so I didn't have time to make music.
Right. I think this is a good place to ask a question. So we talked about singles versus albums. What about for you? Like, what drives you to make a EP versus like a full album? Because you've made plenty of EPs.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So like, what made you decide? Like your Seasons EP or something. Like, why wasn't that strong enough thematically for you to be like, oh, I want that to be the album, the DYVN album?
I think it's with Seasons, it was like with that one in specific, it was Christopher actually, because that's a collaborative album EP with Christopher Eikram.
Okay. Yeah,
and he actually sent me stems to songs and I finished them sort of. And then we also got you on one of the tracks. So that was pretty much his like production or his main body of work, and then I produced it and made it into what it became. With other EPs though, they have a little bit of storytelling, but I just figured I could never like I thought I couldn't say more than I didn't have more to say than four or five song titles. I just couldn't tell like a bigger story. That was, I think, and I just felt like it just, I don't know, it just never came to that. And with this album, why this is finally happening is actually because the label that I'm gonna work with approached me and they asked me like, hey, you want to release an album? I'm like, yeah, it's time. Let's do it. So this is like the very boring story of how this is finally happening. It's just because I got dates.
I see.
And I was just like, yeah, let's do it. It's time. I got it. It's not gonna happen by itself because it's been 4 years at this point. And yeah, it's time.
Do you actually not have, did you not ever release an EP that has 7 tracks or
I tried, dude. I was like, this is the loophole.
You know how
at least when I have my EPs, turn up there, and they never did.
Oh wow! I don't think I.
So I'm like still an album virgin. Like there's no single.
Oh my god, that sounds so wrong.
Don't turn that into god. No, there's nothing up there. There's still like.
Oh yeah, it's all singles and EPs.
And I've released so many singles, and that I just talked about that with Julia an hour before we did the podcast. That sometimes I can't even like tell the names for my songs anymore. Like when a song plays, I wouldn't know what the title is.
Oh,
because it's been so many songs, and sometimes I have that thing where I come up with a title and I'm like, I'm not sure if I already made that title or not. So I actually have to go.
Because you're so prolific, like in my head, I feel like you have, but I guess I just, like you said, you haven't. So this is kind of your big debut.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the best time for me to share this with you. But, for the sake of the podcast, I'm going to share it with you anyway. I feel like Because when I first released the Neon City Memoirs, like all those really, really old tracks, I was building up. So like internally, I had this debate in my head, like, oh man, do you really want this to be the debut like album or whatever? Like, and I feel like nowadays there's so much pressure being put onto, from like small artists all the way to major label artists, who have released like really successful strings of singles and EPs, and then all of a sudden when time comes to the debut
Is
album,
this going leading
so
to
pressure.
No One Cares?
No,
sorry,
I don't think so.
Then keep go on.
But it's just something I've kind of grappled with, and I don't know. I feel like where it led me to was this. I'm not saying it's good or bad or anything, but I feel like for some people, I don't think you're not included, but for some people, it can get them to a place where they don't release anything at all, right? But
Right.
You're prolific. You've been releasing singles and EPs. Obviously you're not the target of this thought, right? But like I feel like with some people, the thought of like a debut like LP or whatever like gets them. Because I used to be there. The thought of a debut LP was so monumental in my head that I don't put out anything. And
it is like that for me, except I put out singles and EPs instead. Like, but the debuted album idea was exactly like you described it. It's like it's such a monster in my head, and I've got all those like, when I think of debuted album, I think of all the good, like all of a sudden all the amazing debut albums from the 60s to the 2020s that I know come to mind. I'm like, it has to be at least this good, like my favorite artists. Right. And so I kind of like I switched it up, and I asked Julia to make this concept, and I asked her to make an album that she would listen to make me make an album that she would listen to, because I feel like in the end I'm probably not gonna listen to it that often, so
mm-hmm.
I would rather make something where I feel like other people can connect to, and where I still feel like it sounds like me, it feels like me, it's my story, but like obviously anyways told through other artists and through their personal stories, but just where we like have where our roads cross sort of in
mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm better expressing my ideas through music than through words sometimes.
Which is why it's perfect for the podcast.
I was just gonna say that. How does it feel to be my podcast co-host hearing that?
But I do want so like for those that happen to be struggling with the notion of the debut album, and maybe that's not allowing you to release the music, maybe that's leading you to like hoarding a lot of your work and not releasing a lot of music. The way I kind of came around was, I don't know, like I just look at some of my favorite artists, right? Like for example, Tom Misch, and I found out about him through Beat Tape 2, like with a lot of other people, and I didn't listen to Beat Tape 1 until like years later, right? So
I've never thought about that.
Although, an argument can't be made that his actual debut album is Geography, because that's like his first non-beat tape. But, like that's splitting hairs.
And exactly, but that's how I feel, for example, when I think of Muramasa as one of the artists that I've always looked up to when I started producing. I was like, his Muramasa album is like the debut album, sort of, because that was like featuring major artists like A$AP Rocky.
Right.
And was released on I think he's like the only major artist out there, but whatever.
Right.
Released through like a major label, and everything before that was like self-released beat tapes. But I just for me it was like, nope, I want to make something in between that, but I still want to make something with vocals and yeah.
Yeah. So,
but I think that's a really good point. That most, like a lot of the artists I listen to, I might not even like their first album, and that's fine. I still like
and that's
them
fine.
as artists.
And I think whatever helps. I think as artists, like a lot of us are drawn to this romantic idea of our very first debut LP being a massive success, like kind of like
I don't even
Dr.
care about
Dre
that in that sense.
Oh, I'm not.
Yeah,
I think like that's what I struggled with at the
Right.
beginning, right? Like,
Right.
and for example, with the Chronic,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dre, his catalog is just unbeatable.
Right.
It's just like the Chronic, and he followed it up with the Chronic 2001, and then like everything. It just speaks for itself. Like no one can touch this resume, if you
Right.
will.
I'm thinking of
And-
Timbaland right now, which was like I think my first like hip hop producer that got me into
Yeah,
listening to hip hop music like that. From a production standpoint.
just like the catalog is just flawless,
Right.
and I think the flawless, while these types of resumes do exist, but I feel like don't let that thought stop you from releasing music. Just like that Tom Misch example. I found out about them through Beat Tape 2.
Right.
I haven't listened to Beat Tape 1 still years later.
Same with
so.
Timbaland for me, Shock Value 2. And then I was like,
Yeah.
wait, if there's a Shock Value 2,
Wait,
there's going to be a
yeah,
Shock Value 1.
exactly.
And I didn't like it that as much as Shock Value 2 back then. So
Yeah. So, and actually, Tom Misch didn't even put Beat Tape 1 on streaming platforms until like many, many years later.
Okay.
So it lived on SoundCloud and Bandcamp for the longest time. So there's no rules in
Right.
the end. Like there's really no
it's
rules.
a very fair point. It's a can I say it this week?
Go for
I
it.
think this is a perfect point for us to come to an end.
Yep.
Unless you have something else to
No interruptions. No interruptions here.
Actually,
But
no. I'm
yeah,
just kidding.
Yeah, I think it was a very good deep dive into album versus singles, which it's just a never-ending debate in my head. Album versus
100%.
singles, and also EPs versus albums, and which I'm really glad we were able to unpack that a little bit too. And and we all look forward to your the album, and
Thank you.
the concept reveal, the behind the scenes, and your YouTube series, and
And you know what?
mark my words, we will be revisiting this episode
Oh, I'm sure.
weeks/months later. Whenever that comes out, we will be revisiting this, and we'll just be filling all the puzzle pieces back in together.
Right, and probably
it'll all make sense.
having some other opinions here and there, and having learned some new things.
Yeah.
And by the way, the album is gonna come out pretty soon. I'm very far behind schedule, so expect
I
the
see.
first
Yeah, I
single
didn't
in
know
a-
when,
in a
so I just said
couple of
weeks or months. So yeah, weeks. Okay, we look forward to it.
Yeah,
very soon.
so stay tuned till the next episode, pretty much.
All right.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. By the way, if anyone has anything to say about this, let us know down in the comments. We really appreciate you guys' feedback, you guys' opinions, and just have a good discussion about EPs versus albums versus singles. You're not alone. And check out this week's playlist featuring Metic's new single, Falling With You.
And subscribe to our YouTube, where you can see our faces.
Yes.
And we'll see you guys in the next one.